Guys, the launch of the Pixel 9 series of phones, as well as the Pixel Watch 3, is right around the corner. August the 13th. That is only 4 days away from the time that I am posting this video, and I thought it might be useful to try and bring some of the broader information together into one video. We're going to talk about price, we're going to talk about hardware, we're going to talk about some features so that you kind of have a one-stop shop, what to expect at this event. Maybe you can start doing some financial planning a little bit early. Let's turn our attention to what I put together here on Threads, and we're going to start off with the price. So the baseline Pixel 9 is allegedly going to start out at $899. Now, so far, we do not have a direct leak, a direct report about this specific phone. So we're kind of using context clues here. We're assuming the base Pixel 9 staying at the same price as last year. Things get a little bit weird from here, though. The Pixel 9 Pro, which is of a very similar size to the Pixel 9 standard, but it does bump up the RAM and it does give you that telephoto zoom, is going to be $999. And you may look at that and you may think, okay, so that is also staying at the same price. But not really, right? Because what we're having happen here is some reshuffling of the branding of these phones. I would argue that the equivalent to the Pixel 8 Pro is not the Pixel 9 Pro. It is the Pixel 9 Pro XL, which is $1199. That is $200 US more expensive. The reason I say this is because they are of the same size. Of the prior models, we would have an 8 and an 8 Pro, a 7 and a 7 Pro. With this line, there's a 9 and then there's a 9 Pro. They are almost the same size. The 9 Pro just adds the RAM and the extra camera, like I mentioned. The 9 Pro XL is the larger model, and that's why I would argue it is actually the equivalent to the Pixel 8 Pro. So we have a new Pro sliding in the middle for the old Pro price, while the Pro XL is kind of what really should be the Pro, and it is $200 more expensive. Now, that is very confusing, but hopefully that now does make sense. And then we have the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, which is maybe equally as confusing, because what this is the Pixel Fold 2, and it is remaining the same price at $1799. So we kind of have a little bit of a mixed bag here, right? Some of them are staying the same. Some of them are getting a de facto price increase. And because of that, we need to kind of dig into these phones a bit more deeply and talk about, what are you getting for that price increase? So we can talk about the cameras first. I grabbed this image from Android Authority where they kind of broke things down. For the Pixel 9 standard, really across the board for the Pixel 9, not the Fold. This is confusing as well, but for the Pixel 9s, excluding the Fold, we're keeping the same 50 megapixel Samsung sensor that I think has served them quite well. So no issues there. But what we're seeing from that point on is the addition of the Sony IMX858, and Google must really love this sensor because they are using it everywhere. It is the new ultra wide, it is the new telephoto, and on the Pro models, it is even going to be the new selfie camera. And I think that that will represent a pretty decent improvement in photo, potentially video quality across those cameras. So better ultra wide, better telephoto zoom, and again on the Pro models, better selfie performance. I actually think this is a pretty solid upgrade. For the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, it's a bit more complicated because what we're getting is a bunch of newer sensors, or at least several newer sensors, but they are also physically smaller sensors than before. I think what that's going to result in is things basically being a wash when you compare it to the original Pixel Fold. Don't expect a big change in the overall performance there for the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. When we talk about internals, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, right? So we're obviously going from the Tensor G3 to the G4, unless you're talking about the Pixel Fold, which is making a pretty big leap from the G2 all the way up to the G4. So definitely a larger improvement there. But by and large, we're running the Tensor G4, which is only going to be a marginal improvement over the G3. I know that there are benchmark scores floating around. I would advise you to pay very little attention to those Geekbench scores. One, the device is not even released yet, and the software is not final. There are no Pixel 9 devices running final software right now available to run Geekbench scores, so those scores are going to change. But even still, I don't think synthetic benchmarks are really all that useful these days. When you look at devices running the G2 or the G3 in normal day-to-day usage, in my experience, they're every bit as fast as any other phone on the market. Unless you're doing video processing or gaming, there they will fall behind. So just keep that stuff in mind. Don't pay much attention to the Geekbench scores. Wait for people to have the phone in their hands and to show you how fast they are in real-world usage, because that's what's actually going to tell the story. Now, an interesting point about these phones is that the Pro models are getting 16 gigs of RAM. So the standard Pixel 9 is 12 gigs. All the rest are 16 gigabytes of RAM. And I do wonder what they're going to use that RAM for. I've mentioned this in prior videos, the rumors of something called Pixie, which might be Google's answer to the new version of Siri. Definitely is something that could rear its head for the release of these phones, and that might require a large language model being unpacked into RAM on your device all the time. Maybe that's why we need 16 gigs of RAM on these Pro model phones. Maybe Pixie would be exclusive to the Pro models. Just something to think about. Now, one change that is going to be maybe overlooked a little bit that hopefully will be a nice improvement is to the modem. We are seeing rumors that that modem is going from an older Exynos modem to a newer model that is supposed to be something like 50% more efficient. So let's all cross our fingers and hope that that means better signal and better efficiency. We all know that Pixel devices, the battery life really does like to drain when you are on cell signal, and that is the fault of the modem. So hopefully that has been somewhat addressed. I don't expect the overall thermals to be changed very radically until we stop using Samsung Foundry and we switch to TSMC for the Tensor G5 and the Pixel 10. So to kind of finish talking about the hardware, one other huge change is just to the visual appearance, the form factor of these phones. We are getting this new flat side rail, which is, if we're being honest, very iPhone-like, or maybe you could say it's essential phone-like. I prefer to go that direction if I'm being honest. I don't think it really looks like an iPhone though, especially from the back. No one's going to see this phone and think it's an iPhone. Maybe from the side you could trick somebody, but from the back it's clearly going to be a Pixel. It's a different looking phone. I personally think that the phones look quite good. I'm excited to get my hands on it and get to actually use one of them, because this, I believe, might be the first time I've used a phone with a flat side rail of this style. All that being said, though, we also need to quickly address some of the software features rumored to be coming to the Pixel 9 as well. So by no means do I think that I have the comprehensive list of everything new coming in terms of software features to the Pixel 9 devices, but we do have a pretty good idea about several of them. So we have something that is going to be basically the improved version of Best Take, where you can take a couple of photos of a group photo, and you can swap different faces in and out of the photo. That is a really cool feature. Now we have something called Add Me coming, where you're going to be able to basically add a person into a photo. So let's say you have a particular backdrop with one person in it. You take that picture, they can leave, the other person comes in, take the picture again, and it will use AI to mesh these two photos together as if they were taken at the same time. That might be something that is fairly useful to some people. And look, we're going to talk about AI a lot here, and I know a lot of people hear AI and they just want to shut their ears off and tune out, and they just don't want to hear about it. What I would advise you to do is just listen to what the feature does, ignore the word AI, and just determine if that actually seems useful to you. So the first one I want to talk about is called Imagine, and basically you're going to use it to generate images. Now you can already do this within Gemini, but this is going to be some sort of pixelified version of this. We also have something called Pixel Screenshots, which is, best I can tell, basically a manual version of Windows Recall. Instead of it taking screenshots automatically every few seconds, you're going to manually take a screenshot. It will then scan that screenshot using OCR, and it will give you a searchable database of the text and also just like imagery, like what does it know is in that screenshot. So you can then search it and find that information really quickly. I'm not sure how useful that will be for me, because it does mean I'm going to have to remember that I need to remember something, and that seems a bit counterintuitive. But if you can get in the habit of just screenshotting things, it could become very useful, while also being more secure, in theory, than how people feel Windows Recall was going to be, because it's you choosing when to take that actual screenshot. Now we also have Pixel Studio, which to me sounds a lot like Magic Editor with some big improvements. So currently with Magic Editor, you can move objects around, you can make them bigger, make them smaller, and the place that they leave behind is replaced with generative AI. It's going to visually look at this image and determine what should be in this gap that you just left. With Pixel Studio, you're going to be able to actually tell it what should be in that space. The example that they gave was a couple standing on a cliffside with an ocean view behind them, and they were able to type in something like a dynamic sunset, and it gave them several dynamic looking sunsets that they're able to then choose between. So again, Magic Editor is cool. Pixel Studio is taking it to another level, and I think that this looks really impressive. And the last one I want to talk about here quickly is the new updated Pixel Weather application. I've talked about this already in a standalone video, but basically, it's a new Pixel Weather app. Apparently, when it releases, hopefully around the time of the Pixel 9, potentially with the Pixel 9, it's going to have a weather radar, and it's also going to have AI-generated summaries that will give you sort of a more dynamic, more personalized weather forecast that might even go as far as giving you advice about what you should be wearing. Again, standalone video of that APK, which you can actually sideload right now, missing a handful of features, obviously, that are going to be there potentially for launch. But again, that video is in the description down below. For the Pixel Watch 3, I'm going to try to run through these as quickly as possible because there's just not as much to say. So we're going to be using the same W5 processor, the same 2 gigs of RAM, and the same 32 gigs of ROM as last year. That might be slightly disappointing. Personally, I'm not really bothered by it. Speed is not the problem of the Pixel Watch. Efficiency maybe can be improved, and that's something you can do with software as well. The W5 processor is still a very recent processor, so again, no big issues there. For the standard model, 307 milliamp hours, that is basically the same as last year, but we are getting a 45 millimeter model as well that has a 420 milliamp hour cell. Hopefully that does help us push the endurance a bit further on that larger model. Now, one thing that's pretty cool, a lot of people don't realize this, Pixel Watch 1 and 2 both have a 30 hertz screen. On a small display like this, it's not super noticeable, but if you compare it to something that is 60 hertz, it does definitely look a little bit worse. The new version is going to be capable of going between 60 hertz and 1 hertz, which is, I think, a really nice improvement. It's going to look good, but by being variable, if you're using that AOD, you're always on display. It can only run at 1 refresh per second, and that should help squeeze out a bit more battery life. Both screens are going to also be 2,000 nits, but they are also variable down to a single nit of brightness. So both of these are pretty darn good improvements. As for pricing, the standard 41 millimeter model will start out at the same $349 as last year, and the larger 45 millimeter model is going to be $399. So nothing too shocking there as well. Can't wait to see what new features they have in the Pixel Watch 3. But guys, that's pretty much all I have for you. Hopefully now you know everything that you need to know going into the August the 13th Pixel 9 event. Definitely hit that subscribe button before you go because we're going to be live alongside that event with probably hundreds of people in the chat having a good time reacting in real time to those announcements. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.